attempts to recontact the spacecraft and resolve the problem failed, and NASA officially ended the mission in January of 2007. Doesn't this story remind you of the Phobos 2 disappearance? Let's look at 2007. Apparently those who hold power over science on our planet are very eager to study Phobos, because on March 26, 2007, Russia and China signed a cooperative agreement on the joint exploration of Mars, which included sending China's first interplanetary probe, Yinghuo-1, to Mars, together with the Phobos-Grunt spacecraft. Yinghuo-1 weighed 150 kilograms and would have been released by the main spacecraft into a Mars orbit. Let's look at that doomed project later. Let's look at 2009 in relationship to Phobos, because it was a very interesting year for those interested in the small moonlet and the secret that it contains. On August 6, 2009, in an interview to C-SPAN cable television program, American astronaut Buzz Aldrin said, "We should visit the moons of Mars. There is a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars every 7 hours." Aldrin did not offer explanations about the mysterious structure. When people find out, they will say, "Who put that there? Who put that there?" Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there. Those are the words of Buzz Aldrin. He was talking again about the peculiar and solitary large rock, a monolith that is stationed or sits on the surface of the Martian moon Phobos. The object appears in Mars Global Surveyor Images SPS 252603 and SPS 255103, dated by the year of 1998. Well, as far as the secrets of the moonlet, Marina Popovich tried her best to get the world to pay attention to them, as did others, such as Professor Burdakov. Apparently, Americans know quite a lot too, as did others, and that's why the new joint Russian-Chinese mission to Phobos, that was in the work for years. But let's look before that at the year of 2010. Lo and behold, international scientists conclude the interior of Phobos likely contains large voids. This was a very important conclusion based on independent results from two subgroups of the Mars Express radio science team, who independently analyzed Mars Express MEX radio tracking data for the purpose of determining consistently the gravitational attraction of the moon Phobos on the MEX spacecraft, and therefore the mass of Phobos. The research of the European Space Agency ESA, published in the magazine Geophysical Research Letters, demonstrated that Phobos was not at all what the generations of astrophysicists and astronomers believed it to be. It was not a captured asteroid. The technical paper discussing the mass and density of Phobos as determined during the 2008 flyby was accepted by the Geophysical Research Letters. One reason to suspect that Phobos is not a captured asteroid is its density. An analysis of Mars Express radio science data gave new information about the mass of Phobos based on the gravitational attraction it exerts on the spacecraft. The team concluded that Phobos is likely to contain large voids, which makes it less likely to be a captured asteroid. Have such careful words. Its composition and structural strength seem to be inconsistent with the capture scenario. When applied to various hypotheses bearing on the origin of Phobos, these results are inconsistent with the proposition that Phobos is a captured asteroid. So, Iosif Shklovsky hypothesis was correct. What is hidden inside those voids? But European scientists, they also looked into the future. They stated that another mission was needed. But why? Well, according to their thought processes, further information about the orbit, shape, rotation, and the interior structure of Phobos would have been gathered by the Phobos-Grunt mission. Understanding the formation of the Martian moons would contribute to the overall understanding of the formation of the solar system. And scientists from the ESA were considering a future sample return mission to Phobos. This time the Russians and the Chinese would carry out the mission. But of course, not without the aid of the Europeans. That's a given by now. Let's look at ESA's Mars Express. It orbits the red planet in a highly elliptical polar orbit that brings it close to Phobos every 5 months. Apparently, it is the only spacecraft currently in orbit around Mars whose orbit reaches far enough from the planet to provide a close-up view of Phobos. Like our moon, Phobos always shows the same side to the planet, so it is only by flying outside the orbit that it becomes possible to observe the far side. Mars Express did just that. On 7, 10, and 13 of March in the year of 2010, Mars Express also collected data with other instruments. Images from the flyby of Phobos on 7th of March 2010 were duly released. The images show Mars' rocky moon in exquisite details with a resolution of just 4.4 meters per pixel. They showed the proposed landing sites for the forthcoming Phobos-Grunt mission. So they were getting ready to help the Russians and the Chinese. Mars Express consists of 2 parts: the Mars Express orbiter and the Beagle 2, a lander designed to perform exobiology and geochemistry research. Although the lander failed to fully deploy after it landed on the Martian surface, the orbiter had been successfully performing scientific measurements since early 2004, namely high-resolution imaging and mineralogical mapping of the surface, radar sounding of the subsurface structure down to the permafrost, precise determination of the atmospheric circulation and composition, and study of the interaction of the atmosphere with the interplanetary medium. And now let's look at the attempt by China and Russia to reach Phobos. They actually planned to launch a joint mission to Mars in 2009 to scoop up samples from the red planet and one of its moons. Russia would launch the spacecraft, while China would provide the survey equipment to carry out the unmanned exploration. The preparation for the joint mission was beset by a number of problems, and it was actually launched 2 years later. After a very long break in its exploration of the solar system, Russia, with the Chinese participation, did launch that risky mission to land on the mysterious Martian moon Phobos and to return the samples of its soil back to Earth. The mission, named Phobos-Grunt, failed almost immediately after its operational launch. The ambitious Russian mission was the 19 robotic expedition. Russia, I would say as the heir to the Soviet Union, has launched toward Mars since 1960. To date, none has achieved full mission success. Now, Phobos-Grunt was launched on November 9, 2011 from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, but subsequent rocket burns intended to set the craft on a course for Mars failed, leaving it stranded in low Earth orbit. Efforts to reactivate the craft were unsuccessful, and it fell back on Earth in an uncontrolled re-entry on 15th of January 2012 over the Pacific Ocean west of Chile. Phobos-Grunt was designed to become the first spacecraft to return a microscopic sample from an extraterrestrial body since the Luna 24 expedition in 1976. So the scope was expanded in comparison to the 1988 Phobos 2 VSK frigate program. Funded by the Russian Federal Space Agency and developed by Lavochkin and the Russian Space Research Institute, Phobos-Grunt was the first Russian-land interplanetary mission to Mars since the failed Mars 96 mission. The last successful interplanetary missions were the Soviets Vega 2 in 1985-1986. But Phobos-Grunt was doomed before it even launched in November of 2011. Cheap parts, design issues, lack of pre-flight testing ensured that the spacecraft would not be able to fulfill its goals. The troubles became apparent a few hours actually after the launch, and as we know, when it failed to fire thrusters to take it out of Earth orbit on its way to Mars and Phobos. Phobos-Grunt fell back to Earth on January 15. The actual failure report issued by the Russian Space Agency Roscosmos makes it clear that the fault was actually homegrown, due to non-space qualified parts being used in some of the electronic circuits. This was a design failure by the spacecraft engineers that might have been caught if they performed actual adequate component and system testing before the flight. As we know, as it's being reported, they did not. So this is the official explanation, and beyond that we just do not have much to go on. And the failure of the Phobos-Grunt mission was a tragedy in itself. A tragedy not only for the Russian space program and Chinese space exploration. It was really an international project to reach Phobos. Those who planned it, those who were truly in charge of it and exchanged information on a daily basis, they knew the mysteries of the Phobos were worth the risk. But if it was a tragedy for the people who live on Earth, it might not have been the tragedy for those on Phobos and Mars. This is speculation, and we do not have much to go on. But of course, this failure did not stop future missions to Phobos. The Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency has an interesting mission in mind for the near future. Instead of exploring the moon or Mars, they actually want to explore the moons of Mars. Known as the Martian Moons Exploration Mission, the plan is to have a robotic spacecraft fly to Phobos and Deimos to explore their surfaces and return samples to Earth for analysis. We've heard something similar already before. The spacecraft would be deployed sometime in the 2020s and would be tasked with two main objectives. The first would be to help scientists determine the origins of Phobos and Deimos, which has been a subject of debate for a long time. According to the Japanese, MMX would land on Phobos and acquire samples of at least 10 grams from more than 2 centimeters below the surface. Analysis of samples returned to Earth would clarify the nature of the asteroid. That's what they claimed that led to the formation of the moon. Deimos observations would be limited to flyby imaging, but combined with ground data to be obtained for Phobos. The Japanese, they should be able to constrain its origin in a substantial manner. Well, to me it's possible that the Japanese top scientists know that Phobos was most likely the later addition to Mars. I mentioned already in my video about the ancient map of Mars that there was only one Martian satellite in the sky when the map was created. Who knows how many thousands of years ago. So to me, Japanese interests indicate that Phobos is the most important of the two. So they probably know something about the strange characteristics of the moonlet. Now, as it stands, the probe was still scheduled to launch in September of 2024, taking the advantage of the fact that Earth and Mars will be at the nearest point to each other in their orbits at this time. It will arrive around Mars by 2025, conducted studies for a 3-year period, and then return to Earth by July of 2029 or 2029. Once there, it will rely on an array of scientific instruments to conduct surveys and obtain samples. Apparently, Japan will be working with France to carry out its mission. France and Japan want to collect pieces of the Martian moon, as we said, and bring them back to Earth. And that was confirmed by the head of the France National Center for Space Studies. And Paris and Tokyo already signed a preliminary agreement about the mission. They will be working in a crowded environment. In 2020, the joint Europe-Russia ExoMars mission will launch a rover tasked with finding traces of Martian life, past or present. NASA's Mars 2020 rover, the joint European-Russian ExoMars rover, China's first Mars mission, India's second Mars orbiter, the United Arab Emirates Hope orbiter, and SpaceX commercial Red Dragon lander are all scheduled to launch in 2020 and arrive at the Red Planet around February in the year of 2021. A Russian mission to the Martian moon Phobos, launching in 2020, would return samples from Phobos that contain bits and pieces of Mars itself. The Russian mission will be the space agency's second attempt to return a sample from Phobos, as we know. Since 2013, NASA developed the Phobos Surveyor mission concept with an orbiter and a small rover that is proposed to launch sometime after the year of 2023. Proposed NASA's mission proposes to launch in 2020 and reach Mars orbit in 2021 to conduct multiple flybys of the Martian moons. NASA's Curiosity rover has been crisscrossing the Red Planet for a number of years now. The American Space Agency has plans for a manned trip in the next 10 to 15 years, with a similar project also being pursued by US billionaire Elon Musk. Meanwhile, NASA's Maven spacecraft in orbit around Mars maneuvered out of the path of Phobos early in 2017, after navigators predicted the spacecraft could run into the Martian moon in the near future, highlighting the challenge of tracking an international fleet of Mars probes set to double in size by 2021, as we already know. The space around Mars will be very busy. The Maven orbiter, in its third year studying the Martian atmosphere, performed a minor rocket burn on February 28 to change its speed by less than 1 mile per hour, according to NASA, tweaking the trajectory enough to escape a projected collision with Phobos a week later. On its new path, Maven missed the irregularly shaped moon by around 2.5 minutes. The rocket burn was Maven's first collision avoidance maneuver to move out of the way of Phobos, according to NASA. Okay, Phobos, as we know, is located 6,000 kilometers above Mars, higher than the altitude of NASA's other operational orbiters, Mars Odyssey and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. But Maven is positioned in an elliptical orbit, carrying it as high as about 6,100 kilometers on each lap around the planet before skimming the Martian atmosphere at the orbit's lowest point. The elliptical paths of Maven, India's Mars Orbiter mission, and the European Space Agency's Mars Express spacecraft make them often cross paths with Phobos and other probes. The ESA's ExoMars orbiter is also flying in an oval-shaped perch, but ground controllers plan to begin maneuvering it into a lower circular orbit. Given the Phobos' size, the moon measures, as I said, about 27 kilometers across it on its longest axis. NASA said that MAVEN had a high probability of colliding with Phobos on March 6 of 2017 without the avoidance burn. The two were predicted to arrive at their orbit crossing point within 7 seconds of each other. So as you can see, the whole neighborhood around Phobos is now getting crowded. I read that the JPL navigation and tracking teams watch out for possible collisions every day of the year. It looks to me that they are as interested in the Martian moon as they were in the late 1980s. The official explanation of modern mainstream scientists is that the current observations of the moon are consistent with Phobos being a rubble pile. In addition, images obtained by the Viking probes in the 1970s clearly showed a natural object, not an artificial one. Nevertheless, they have to add that mapping by Mars Express probe and subsequent volume calculations do suggest the presence of voids and indicate that it is not a solid chunk of rock, but a porous body. So that's their official explanation. And of course they want to say that it's a natural object. I understand that. Nobody wants to make any more fear or panic. But if it was a natural object and not an artificial one, then what is the rush to get to Phobos? The solar system is big enough to study other celestial bodies. Well, obviously, mainstream science doesn't share views of Valery Burdakov or even Buzz Aldrin. You know, but there is this haste to get to the moon of Mars, to explore it, to take samples. Who created Phobos? Is this a space station? An orbital one? Is this an observatory? Is Phobos a battle station? Is this a satellite of Mars? Are there aliens or their robots that destroy and abduct terrestrial space probes? I believe that our governments know, and that the American astronaut Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, might be able to reveal some of his knowledge. Something interesting I want to let you know. In his monograph, translated and published by NASA, titled The Difficult Road to Mars, Soviet engineer and designer Vladimir Perminov said this: "Nevertheless, one cannot rule out that cities covered by sand may exist in the Martian deserts. That would be evidence of an ancient Martian civilization that disappeared or moved to other planets. Perhaps Martians once arrived on Earth and left some evidence of their visit. Perhaps they built huge runways in South America, maybe constructed a chemically pure iron column in India. Now chemically pure iron can be produced only in the laboratory. And build the mysterious Egyptian pyramids. It is also possible that the English fiction writer Swift managed to find and decipher records that Martians left on Earth. Based on these records, long before the Martian moons were discovered, Swift predicted that Mars had two satellites. One of them he named Phobos, Fear, the other he named Deimos, Horror, where they precisely predicted the parameters of their orbits. Possibly the next generations of Mars explorers will clarify these questions." So this was a very interesting comment from a top Soviet scientist. And he confirmed his views in 2007, when he was already retired. Vladimir Gennadievich Perminov was contacted by Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper. I have the full article dated April 27, 2007, if serious researchers want to explore it further. So maybe we should be more careful when planning to send lasers to the red planet and its strange moon. We must be cautious when dealing with planet Mars. as it is the one planet that has fascinated humankind for centuries. We must not read too much into the mankind's attempts to explore the red planet, especially when such attempts seem to malfunction. Mars is the most perplexing place, without a doubt, and many of the answers we seek about it will be only answered when man finally lands on its surface. Having said all that, it could well be that there is more of a mystery here than just trying to explain Mars and its planetary formation. It would seem that our efforts to study the planet at close quarters are constantly beset by either our own technical inadequacies or the circumstances that yet remain a complete and total mystery, and quite rightly, once again, fall into the unexplained category. Such a category must account for the Phobos 2 mission and the perplexing photograph that it sent back to Earth shortly before it was lost in space. And we know about other spacecraft that vanished and are lost, but maybe not forever. Please subscribe to my channel, and in the future I'll discuss other Soviet missions to other planets and the strange circumstances around them. Thank you.